The wind carries the smell of smoke and salt across the old stones of Jerusalem. Bells toll from a distant church as pilgrims fall to their knees, whispering prayers that dissolve into the dust. A voice from the west has called them, an order from God himself, they believe. But the men who march beneath the cross carry more than faith. They carry debts, pride, and hunger. Some seek heaven, others the spoils of a dying world. As the sun sinks behind the city's golden dome, the first banners of the Crusaders ripple in the dying light. And somewhere in the crowd, a question stirs. A question no priest dares to answer. Was this truly God's will, or man's ambition dressed in holiness? The world trembled at the sound of a single voice. From the pulpit of Clermont, the Pope's words spread like wildfire across kingdoms torn by famine and fear. He promised redemption, eternal life, and absolution for sins no priest could cleanse. To a starving Europe, heaven was no longer a dream. It was a command to march. Men sold their fields, women pawned their wedding rings, and children were left behind in villages that would never see their fathers again. For many, faith was not the reason they went. It was the excuse. The cross became a banner of both salvation and greed. Winter's cold turned roads into rivers of mud as the first Crusaders began their march eastward. Behind every armored knight came a line of barefoot peasants dragging carts, carrying infants, and clutching wooden crosses. They believed the journey itself would cleanse their souls, that every blister and wound was a step toward paradise. But hunger and sickness struck before they saw a single battle. Corpses lay by the roadside, wrapped in rags, their mouths open as if still praying. And still, more came, drawn not by understanding, but by the promise of glory, whispered in church halls. Far from the cold of Europe, news of the crusade reached the cities of the East. In Aleppo, Damascus, and Cairo, scholars and imams debated the meaning of this strange holy invasion. Some called it madness, others destiny. To them, the war was not between good and evil, but between pride and pride. In the mosques, the call to unity began to echo, but few yet understood how deeply the coming storm would wound both worlds. Faith was about to become the sharpest weapon of all. As winter gave way to spring, thousands of crusaders gathered at Constantinople's gates. Emperor Alexios watched from his palace balcony, uncertain whether these were allies or invaders. Their armor shone, but their discipline did not. Hungry, desperate, and armed with holy zeal, they flooded the city's markets and churches. Beneath the shimmer of Byzantine mosaics, suspicion took root. The East and West, both claiming to serve the same God, now stood on the edge of betrayal. The road to Jerusalem was paved not only with faith, but with fear of one another. They crossed the Bosporus at dawn, leaving Europe behind as the chill of spring faded into the dust of Asia Minor. The Crusaders believed they had entered a sacred story. Yet what awaited them was not divine revelation, but hunger and heat. The sun beat down upon armor that scorched their skin, and rivers turned red with the blood of those who fell behind. Local villagers fled before them, terrified not of infidels, but of Christians. The Holy Army was becoming a swarm, and though their lips still whispered prayers, their hearts began to harden, each mile eroding the purity of their cause. The siege of Nicaea was the first true test of faith. Surrounded by high stone walls, the city refused to yield to the cross. The Crusaders built towers and flung stones, singing hymns between screams. Inside the city, families prayed as the earth trembled beneath each strike. When the gates finally opened, it was not victory that awaited them. It was betrayal. The Byzantine banners already flew from the towers. The emperor had secretly taken the city, denying the Crusaders their plunder. Rage burned hotter than the fires of faith. The Holy Alliance began to fracture on that very day. They marched south through fields of death. The land itself seemed cursed, wells poisoned, villages empty, carrion birds feasting on the fallen. Men who once prayed for paradise now prayed only for water. The weak were left behind, the sick abandoned under makeshift crosses. Priests spoke of martyrdom, but soldiers muttered of madness. Each step toward Jerusalem felt less like a pilgrimage and more like punishment. The Holy War had begun to consume its own believers. Antioch rose before them like a mirage of stone and fire. Behind its towering walls lay food, shelter, and glory, but the city would not surrender easily. The siege stretched for months, winter creeping through their camps. Disease spread, horses died, and men resorted to eating leather and grass. Still, the priests promised that endurance would earn them paradise. Yet in the dark of night, soldiers began to steal, lie, and kill their own for scraps. Faith was no longer a banner. It was a disguise for survival. When Antioch finally fell, the Crusaders entered not as saviors, but as conquerors. The city's streets ran with blood, its mosques looted and churches defiled by vengeance. They called it God's victory. Yet in the quiet afterward, even the victors could not meet each other's eyes. Beneath the banners of the cross, greed had triumphed over grace. The war for heaven had become a kingdom of earth. The world began to see what truly drove the Holy War, and it was not God who had led them this far, but man's own hunger for power. After years of marching and death, Jerusalem finally appeared on the horizon, a city of stone shimmering beneath a white sun. The Crusaders wept when they saw it, believing their suffering was over. But the city did not welcome them. Its gates were closed, its defenders ready. The desert wind howled like a warning. For 7 days, the Crusaders circled its walls, praying, fasting, and sharpening their blades. They had come for redemption, but they would soon baptize the city in fire. Heaven and hell were about to meet upon the same ground. At dawn, the horns of war echoed through the valley. The Crusaders stormed the walls, ladders swaying under a storm of arrows. Shouts of "God wills it!" drowned the screams of the dying. Blood slicked the stones, turning every step into a struggle between faith and flesh. Inside the city, defenders fought to the last, their prayers rising with smoke to the same heavens as their enemies. When the gates broke, the holy city became a graveyard. The cross had conquered, but the victory reeked of death. By nightfall, silence fell over Jerusalem. The streets were lined with bodies, and the holy places lay desecrated. Crusaders who once prayed for purity now searched for gold, relics, and wine. In the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, men knelt before the altar, their hands still stained with blood. Some whispered thanks, others trembled. Was this victory or blasphemy? The question hung heavy in the smoke. The Holy War had delivered them to the city of God, but they had left their souls somewhere along the road. When word of Jerusalem's fall spread across the east, grief turned to fury. From Damascus to Cairo, a new resolve began to rise. The Muslim world, long divided, now found unity in outrage. Imams spoke of vengeance, of reclaiming what was stolen. For every city the Crusaders took, they left behind a wound that would not heal for centuries. The call to jihad echoed through the deserts, and a new generation prepared to fight, not for conquest, but for justice. The cycle of holy war had begun. As dawn rose over Jerusalem, the Crusader banners fluttered above silent walls. The conquerors gazed upon their prize, yet felt an emptiness no victory could fill. The promise of heaven had delivered only ruin. Their crusade had changed the world, but not in the way they hoped. Behind every triumph lay betrayal, and beneath every prayer, ambition. The war for God had revealed the deepest truth of all, that even faith, when wielded by human hands, can become the deadliest weapon on earth. The city was theirs, but peace never came. The Crusaders divided Jerusalem like scavengers, splitting a carcass, carving new titles from the ruins, counts, princes, and kings of a stolen land. The poor, who once dreamed of heaven, were forgotten, buried beneath walls they helped to raise. Those who had come for God now ruled for gold. Even the priests quarreled over relics and thrones. The holy city became a kingdom of distrust, each crusader lord building his own empire atop the bones of the faithful. The once mighty crusade splintered into rival realms: Antioch, Edessa, Tripoli, and Jerusalem. Each ruled by men who no longer prayed together. Suspicion grew where unity once stood. To survive, some forged uneasy truces with their Muslim neighbors, trading grain and silver under the cloak of darkness. What began as holy conquest now became politics in armor. The sword of faith dulled into greed, and the very men who claimed to free the Holy Land were slowly becoming strangers within it. Yet beneath the decay, a few still believed. Pilgrims continued to arrive, barefoot and starving, convinced they were walking in the footsteps of saints. But the holy city they found was filled with fear. Armed guards watched every gate, and merchants demanded gold for entry to the sacred shrines. Faith had become a commodity, sold, taxed, and controlled. For every relic kissed by a pilgrim, another lie was whispered in the name of prophet. The Crusaders' dream had turned into a marketplace of salvation. Beyond the city walls, vengeance gathered strength. Muslim leaders united under one banner, vowing to reclaim what was lost. Whispers of a new commander spread across the deserts, a man of vision and mercy who would rise from the ashes of defeat. His name would one day echo through history: Saladin. But for now, the Crusaders remained blind to the storm forming beyond their walls. Pride had deafened them, and arrogance would soon destroy them. The age of conquest was giving way to the age of reckoning. As years passed, the first Crusader kings aged into tyrants. Their castles rose, their faith dimmed, and their swords turned against each other. Jerusalem, once seen as heaven on earth, had become a prison of power. The people no longer spoke of miracles, only taxes and wars. What began as a holy mission had become a cycle of betrayal, a kingdom already rotting from within. And far away, in lands they thought subdued, the fires of revenge began to burn once more. Across the deserts of Syria, a new leader rose, a man of learning, restraint, and unshakable faith. His name was Salah ad-Din, known to the West as Saladin. Unlike the lords who had conquered Jerusalem, he did not seek glory through blood. He sought unity. Where others ruled through fear, he led through mercy. He listened to scholars, healed the sick, and treated enemies with honor. To his people, he was not a conqueror, but a restorer of justice. The age of the Crusaders had created its own answer, a lion wrapped in patience, waiting for his moment to strike. The Crusader kingdoms, once powerful, began to crumble under their own corruption. Greed had weakened their faith, and rival lords fought over scraps of land. While they feasted in castles, Saladin united cities and tribes once divided by pride. His discipline turned chaos into purpose. The people followed him not out of fear, but belief. And when he spoke of reclaiming Jerusalem, the deserts answered like thunder. The balance of the Holy Land was about to change forever. While Saladin forged unity, the Crusaders turned on each other. In the halls of Jerusalem, they whispered of betrayal. Some sold secrets to survive. Others turned their swords on allies. The holy banner that once inspired nations now symbolized division. The people no longer saw God in their rulers. They saw greed, lust, and fear. The West had lost its moral heart, and the East was ready to reclaim it. The war that began with faith would now be fought for redemption. The year was of 187. The Crusaders, confident and unprepared, met Saladin's forces near the arid hills of Hattin. The air shimmered with heat, and the Crusaders carried little water. Saladin's men surrounded them, cutting off every escape. As the sun climbed higher, thirst turned to delirium. When the final charge came, it was not a battle, it was a reckoning. The once mighty armies of the Cross fell beneath the green banners of the Crescent. The Holy Land belonged again to those who had lost it in faith, not fury. When Jerusalem surrendered to Saladin, there was no massacre, no fire, no vengeance. Instead, he opened the gates for the poor to leave and allowed the churches to remain. His mercy stunned the world. In the West, chroniclers called it a miracle. In the East, justice restored. The conqueror, who had been painted as the enemy of Christendom, became a legend of honor. His victory revealed what the Crusaders had forgotten, that true strength is not in the sword, but in the heart that chooses restraint. News of Jerusalem's fall struck Europe like thunder. Kings wept, priests shouted from pulpits, and peasants trembled as if the world itself were ending. From France to England, banners of the cross were raised once more. But this time, the fire that drove them was weaker. The people had seen too much blood, too many broken promises. Still, 3 kings swore an oath to reclaim the Holy Land: Richard of England, Philip of France, and Frederick of Germany. The world called it the Third Crusade. They called it redemption. But redemption was already beyond reach. The Third Crusade began with splendor and pride. Great ships sailed across the Mediterranean, their decks filled with knights in shining armor. Songs of victory filled the air, but beneath the hymns lay exhaustion. Many who marched had never known peace. They were born into war and bound to die by it. As they landed on the shores of Acre, the Crusaders faced a truth their fathers had ignored. The enemy they feared was not the one before them, but the doubt within. For years they fought sieges, truces, betrayals, and brief moments of uneasy peace. Saladin and Richard, though enemies, shared a strange respect. They exchanged gifts, spared prisoners, and treated one another with honor. In a war built on hate, they discovered humanity. When Richard fell ill, Saladin sent him fruit and snow from the mountains to cool his fever. 2 warriors, divided by faith, united by the weariness of endless blood. Even legends grow tired of war. When the fighting ended, Jerusalem remained under Muslim rule. Richard's armies were broken, his men weary, and his faith scarred. He signed a truce with Saladin that allowed Christian pilgrims to visit the holy city without harm. It was not triumph, but mercy that closed the war. Richard sailed home a hero to some, a failure to others. Yet both men, warriors of faith and doubt, had learned the same truth. Victory means little when peace is lost. The centuries that followed brought more crusades, each weaker than the last. Children marched, kings argued, and the dream of holy conquest faded into myth. The cross that once united a continent now divided it. The wars that claimed to serve God had revealed more about man. His pride, his greed, his longing to make heaven bend to his own image. The Crusades did not end with a victory or defeat. They ended with silence, with a world too tired to fight for illusions. Only ruins remained, and within them, the faint echo of faith lost to history. Centuries passed, yet the scars of the Crusades never healed. The walls of Jerusalem still whispered of blood, and the deserts held bones that once marched in God's name. The empires born of faith had turned to dust, but their echoes shaped kingdoms that followed. In Europe, tales of holy war became legends told by firelight, stories of saints and sinners woven together. But behind the hymns and glory, truth slept uneasily. The Crusades had not brought peace. They had only taught mankind how easily faith could be used to wound the world. In the centuries that followed, trade replaced crusade. The silk and spice routes opened, and merchants succeeded where warriors had failed. The East and West, once divided by faith, found new ways to exchange ideas, art, and learning. From the ashes of war came the birth of understanding, medicine, philosophy, and science traveling between cultures once sworn to destroy each other. The same roads once marked by blood now carried the seeds of a new world. From hatred, strange as it seemed, grew the roots of rebirth. Yet memory is stubborn. The wars that ended in the Holy Land began again in the hearts of men. For centuries, rulers invoked the Crusades to justify conquest, and preachers recalled them to stir division. The ghosts of those holy wars became weapons in new battles, each side claiming divine favor. The story of the Crusades was never only history. It was a warning left in stone and scripture. When men believe God stands behind their hatred, no one is safe beneath the sky. But even through centuries of loss, compassion survived. Pilgrims still walk the same roads, not as conquerors, but as seekers of peace. Muslims, Christians, and Jews now share prayers beneath the same sun, divided by belief yet united by memory. The stones of Jerusalem no longer echo with swords, but with the footsteps of those searching for meaning. The city remains what it always was, a mirror of the human soul, reflecting both our cruelty and our capacity to forgive. Now the echoes of those wars fade into legend. The Crusades were never only about land or God. They were about mankind's endless struggle to understand itself. The cross and the crescent, the conqueror and the conquered, all bound by the same yearning for meaning in a world of uncertainty. What began with a call to faith ended as a mirror to our deepest flaws. And perhaps that is the final truth of the Holy Wars, that heaven was never won or lost in battle, but in the choices men made when they believed they fought for it.